You're listening to Fresh Look with Hen Mazzig, presented by the Israel on Campus Coalition. Welcome back. We're so glad you could join us today for episode 2 of Fresh Look. This week's episode will feature a robust discussion on antisemitism. Our featured guest, Daniella Rabbani, lives in the nexus of art, culture, and politics in the global Jewish community. Daniella is an award-winning actress, and her credentials include several productions with New York's famed National Yiddish Theatre Folksbiene, which brings Yiddish-language theater back to life, the Americans in Ocean's 8. Daniella is a second-generation descendant of Holocaust survivors and an outspoken advocate for Israel and the American Jewish community. Welcome to the show, Daniella.
I'm so excited to have this incredible person that I admire, and I'm kind of fangirling a bit. Daniella Rabbani, an incredible, you've done it all, like actor and a voice for the Jewish community, and I like a dear friend for me. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you today?
I'm really excited to be here. I'm like such a fan of yours, and the fact that I get to be your friend is like feels so good. And then we get to like do this, have this conversation. I feel like these conversations are important to have, and it's just an honor to to get to have them. I think about like my father, was in the Yom Kippur War. My grandparents are Holocaust survivors, and I'm like, I get to have the conversation. How lucky am I? How lucky am I that that's where we're at? Maybe my children's generation, like maybe they could transcend that too.
It's so right. I mean, we're all doing our part, and we just can do whatever we can do, and I think we're obligated to do what we can do, and I feel like you're doing that. And so I want to start more with your career, with your professional career. You've done everything from selling, not selling, she stole it at the end, something to Sandra Bullock, right?
Yeah.
That was amazing.
I was it was the first scene in Ocean's 8, and I got to do that like 8 months pregnant. It was very, very fun.
Amazing. I remember loving the scene itself. And you've been on God Friended Me, and you've done so many things that I don't have even time to go through. But I want to ask if there's one role that you played that was very connected, or made you feel that that your Jewish identity is informing the role that you're doing. One specific one that you have that you can share with us.
Well, I started my career in the Yiddish theater. So right when I graduated from acting school, I got a scholarship to study Yiddish, and then I went. I would tour around the United States, and then did some off-Broadway shows, and then I even got to perform in Poland and in Austria, and really beautiful venues singing in Yiddish. And that, of course, was informed by my Jewish identity, by my grandparents, my grandfather, who's my real source of inspiration for me. But when I was cast as Rabbi Zoe Schwartz on God Friended Me, I felt so well suited for it. And I also felt like, there are some really fantastic non-Jewish actors who have played Jewish roles really well, but I get to do it from a place of really like deep information, cellular knowledge, and the fact that I was raised modern Orthodox, and that I got to be the rabbi, was so it was like a personal win for me. It also gave me a lot of sort of permission online to speak from that place. So I would, like, when I was pregnant, I would write posts about sort of Dvar Torah, like sort of things that Kabbalistic captions and musings on being Jewish. And I felt like, for whatever reason, because I got this recurring role on this Fox TV show, that I had that permission slip. I probably had it all along, but that was like external validation or something.
Yeah, well, that's so interesting. I mean, do you feel like before, generally, like being an American Jewish person, you didn't have the liberty or the confidence? Why didn't you have the confidence that you had after, as you're saying, playing this role, to speak up about this?
There was always a sense for me that I wanted to fit in. you know, that I didn't want to just play Jewish roles, or that especially because I started in the Yiddish theater, that I would have to prove that it's a legitimate art form, and it like so definitely is. That I need not prove it. It's like awesome, and so I think there was a sense in me, and I see it in other actors, this idea that like I'm not just Jewish, I'm a person, I'm and I want to be considered for all these different roles. So if I sort of pigeonhole myself, which I've, you know, been told not to be too Jewish, or not to talk too much about it, blah blah blah. If I pigeonholed myself, that I wouldn't have that sort of upward mobility that I was, you know, hoping for as an artist. Um, I think that that advice, at least for me, was off, because my art comes from my authenticity. It comes from my soul, and my soul has been through a Jewish experience, also a human experience. And I'm happy to play other ethnicities and other backgrounds, but there's something unabashedly and truly Jewish about me. So the more I own that, and continue to own that, the happier, more fulfilled, more generous I can be as a person and as an artist, as an actor.
That's an amazing piece of advice. And you know, we're working with, this is airing on Israel on Campus Coalition, and a lot of the students that are listening to us, I'm sure, have a similar experience where they feel like they shouldn't be too Jewish and shouldn't pigeonhole themselves into something, and they need to, you know, to maybe even, I mean, in a sense, it's also there's shame involved in it, and the idea that you shouldn't,
No, that's generational, you know, like intergenerational. I think like there racism on all levels, anti-Jewish racism, you know, at the hand of Nazis, at the hand of, you know, well-meaning people who think they're complimenting you when they say we run the banks and we run the media and etc. Like this type of othering of Jews has made us afraid, and that fear has caused a lot of shame, not just in ourselves, but in our parents, in the way they parented us, in our grandparents, the way they, you know, there was like a whole generation of people who spoke Yiddish in Israel, and you know, in the United States, and of course everywhere else, where they just wouldn't speak Yiddish to their children because God forbid they would be too Jewish. And it's not just like it wasn't just like, oh, someone wouldn't like them. It was someone would hurt them. You know, they were trying to protect their children from their Jewishness. So we've learned this, you know, generation after generation, this push-pull between this deep pride of our heritage, of our rituals, of the legacy of being Jewish, and then a deep, pervasive shame of the way we look, of the way we sound. Look at Woody Allen and the way he makes fun of his, you know, nebbishy quality. Why is he hunched over like that? Why does he have so much self-hatred? That's internalized anti-Semitism, is what that is. So I just want to normalize that experience, I guess, is what I'm saying, is that like, if someone is feeling that shame or that fear, that is an inheritance. In Hebrew, it would be like Yerusha, or in Yiddish, we would call it Yerusha, right? Like that is part of our inheritance. And part of being Jewish is that we are deeply joyful, and also there is absolute sorrow and mournfulness in the experience. And so shame is part of that mourning. Right.
And I do feel that, I mean, there's the part that you mentioned, that it's a fear because you're afraid to be hurt. But we're seeing now with Black Lives Matter and with the LGBTQ movement and other causes, that young people that are part of minority or in the intersection of several minorities taking more pride and ownership of their identity. But I still feel that the Jewish community and young Jews are not there yet, and they're not feeling, a lot of them are, and I'm not trying to paint this all with a wide brush, but I think, and many are also called to task, but I do still feel like we, and let me know, I want to know what you think about that, that we are still not fully welcome to embrace our identity within progressive movement, while other minorities, and being part of the LGBTQ community, I can tell you that I'm very proud of my queer identity here in London, and everyone knows that. And I would, you know, and I would go to Pride, and I would go to gay parties, and I'll be very proud of it. But my Jewish identity would often be rejected or looked down upon or questioned, or my connection to Israel would be questioned. And that's all part of my identity. And we are in the time that people reclaiming their identity. But I mean, what do you make of it?
No, I was actually going to say how inspired I am, and I see other people are, by the LGBTQ plus community, like the Pride events and the Pride in each and every person who has come out, I think is so deeply inspiring. And I think it is inspiring other minorities.
Right.
I think the thing about being Jewish is that everyone is so different, right? Like, we look different, we come from different backgrounds. Some people have some scarring from like the religious experience of being Jewish. Of course, that's only one aspect, but it's there. I think it's an evolution. I really do. I'm sorry that we feel this way. I'm just validating that we all do, that I at 37 am just now getting to enjoy hosting a Shabbat meal. And it's not that people haven't wanted to come over. It's that I wanted so badly to fit in. And that wanting to fit in actually ostracized me more from my own self. And no one wants to hang with someone who's like dying to be accepted. It will probably require a Jewish person to say, maybe I think, what do you say, before a non-Jewish, you know, cinematographer, director, writer, whatever, will concur. Mm-hmm. But we do need that two-way street.
Yeah, and it was true when Scarlett Johansson was wanting to play a role of a trans. I'm not sure if she played a trans woman at a film. I think she did at the end, and that received a lot of criticism. And I think it's also true when it's non-Jews that are playing playing Jews, and in the sense of it's not, as you said, like, it's not going to the underrepresentation of Jews on the big screen. It goes to the fact that they don't have the full understanding, or you're just not Jewish, so you can't really understand what it's like. You would never understand what it's like. Just like we realize that non-Black folks will not understand racism the way that Black people do. So I mean, and I'm sorry for comparing, but this is I think this is the reality that we're facing, and instead of that being obvious, we have to go into the root of like saying, wait, but you're not doing it with any other community. Why are you doing it with us? We are still a minority. Even if we have some representation, we're still a tiny minority. And as you said, is often we even represent ourselves in a poor way. So that's a call for every director and every producer out there that is looking to cast a Jewish person to a role. Daniella's Instagram is for messages, and fully stand behind. I think you would be an amazing Golda, by the way. But
good too.
I want to speak about Uma, the film that you created. That is a project that you directed, where you discussed the experience of Holocaust survivors with intergenerational trauma and how it passes on to the next generation. Tell us not only about the film and where we can watch it, but also what did you learn along the way?
Thank you so much for asking about it. I have been sitting with this idea of the fact that our generation is the last to know Holocaust survivors, to know them intimately, you know, to be held by them, to be raised by them, to be loved by them, to hear their stories, to offer them joy. And I knew at a very young age that that I had a responsibility, and I don't know that everyone does feel that level of responsibility, but I certainly did, because I am a storyteller, and my grandparents' story was never told. They never wanted to relive those painful experiences, and they also, I think, wanted to protect not only themselves but my mother and her brother, and their four grandchildren. I mean, these are horrific memories, and they didn't want our worldview to be painted with that. And yet, what happens in trauma is that without that closure, both for the traumatized and for the ones being cared for, who, meaning if a parent and grandparent have PTSD, there's a part of them that is not fully online, and the child feels that because they're easily triggered, because they're sad out of nowhere, because there's just an ache in the air. And so I felt that very deeply growing up, and I grappled with my own feelings of depression and anxiety. And in my research, I found out that it's very normal for children of Holocaust survivors and their own grandchildren to experience that deep, deep, deep ache, almost as if that trauma had happened to them. And that phenomenon is called either intergenerational trauma, or there's a field of study called epigenetics.
That's an excellent segue to the next question and the final one, because often when I go to college campuses and I speak to students, the Jewish ones and even non-Jews that want to support the Jewish community, want to stand up against anti-Semitism, and want to be Zionists, that by the definition that is the most simple definition, that I don't know why people keep adding things to Zionism. Zionism just means that you support the right of a Jewish state to exist, that Israel has the right to exist in our ancestral homeland. It doesn't mean anything about anyone else.
But it also just means that Israel exists, guys. Like, it's happened. It is happening. And so how do we make a thing that it exists better? No?
Right. Yeah, of course. I mean, to be yeah, no, I completely agree. But I think that when they're speaking about Israel and about Zionism, about being Zionists, the fact you're completely right, because why are we discussing if Israel has the right to exist or not? Which other country are we having a conversation that is like that? No other country. So I want to know what's your take and what's your advice to those Jewish students that want to fight anti-Semitism but not willing to compromise for being pro-Israel or being pro-peace or being and most of them are pro-peace. They're not. I mean, I don't know many students that are Jewish and standing up for Israel and think that Palestinians have no right for anything, or that they don't have the right for dignity and security. I think all of them. I never met any student that doesn't believe in that as well, or any Jewish person. I think as a whole, we have different solutions to what peace would look like. But I think all Jewish people that I've met in my life do believe in peace and want both people to live in peace. So yeah, what would be your advice to those students?
Well, I mean, you're Israeli, right? So that in Israel, people are like, hey, we live here, we raise children here, I've been here for generations, and something has to change, and we live in a progressive society, which means progress forward, what we have been doing and how we've been living with our Arab brothers and sisters. Like, it ain't working. Most Israelis would say that. What the solution is, I don't know. Most Jews would say that too. You are not alone. Most Jewish people are grappling with the fact that people don't understand these concepts, that no one, maybe there was a time when you would have to be pro-Israel or pro-Palestinian, but no one that I know of is living in these binaries, right? I mean, the idea, what are we going to do with all those Jews and all those Palestinians who are already living there? Let's make their lives better. My suggestion, to any college student is to know that this podcast exists for you to know that you're not alone, that there are misunderstandings in the world, and you were put on this earth as a prayer and as a real miracle for our ancestors. And yeah, sometimes that is a huge burden, and you are magic. You are actual literal magic. And if sometimes you have to stand up to someone in discourse, not with violence, but with discourse and with heart, and say, I think you have a misunderstanding. Jewish people have no interest in this level of violence or that you speak of. And, we are pro peace. Most of us are advocating for peace. And if you want to advocate with me, let's do this together. But I am not going to engage in violence. That's what a Jewish person says. I will not engage in violence, even in this discourse. Anyway, what I want you to know is that you're not alone, and that we all have to find the words together. And that's why this podcast, and why you exist, why your work is so important, is because we need the words. There is a misunderstanding. I want to validate that. And I'm sorry that it's on your shoulders, but magic costs extra sometimes.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And I think Harvey Milk once said, and I love this quote, so I'll finish with that every gay person must come out. As difficult as it is, you must tell your immediate family, you must tell your relatives, you must tell your friends, you must tell everyone, because once they know that you are, and that their children are, and that their brothers and sisters are, they will know that we are everywhere. And I think for us as Jewish people, and that really goes to a lot of what you spoke about, it's so important for us to be visible and to be everywhere, and to show our beautiful self, and show our, you said magic, and I always say it's a miracle that we exist, and we cannot forget that. And the more we are proud of who we are, the more we are showing our true colors, the less anti-Semitism will be out there, and people will be less hateful or ignorant about who we are. And the less ignorant they are, the less hateful people are. I want to thank you so much for your time and for being part of this. You are an incredible power of good, and just such an important voice in our community. And I truly love you a lot, and I appreciate you. And thank you so much, Daniella.
Thank you so much. Can I just add that we can't fight darkness with darkness.
Yes, absolutely.
We fight darkness with light and with joy. And there's an opportunity to experience Jewish joy. Go for it. Take it.
Yes. Yes. I love that. Don't be consumed by anti-Semitism. Just remember that there's so much beauty in who we are as a people. So yeah, thank you, Daniella. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Love you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for the second Fresh Look episode. We're so glad you could join us for this fascinating discussion with award-winning actress Daniella Rabbani. Be sure to subscribe to our channels and stay tuned for the next episode of Fresh Look.